I was 19 years old when I made the biggest mistake of my life. Not the kind of mistake you laugh about later. Not the kind you tell your friends over coffee and everyone nods because they've been there too. The kind that changes the temperature of every room you walk into. The kind that splits a family down the middle like dry wood. I fell for my mother's boyfriend's son. And my stepfather caught us. Not in a dramatic movie moment. Not with shouting and pointed fingers. He caught us laughing together in the kitchen at 2 a.m. over cold pizza and bad jokes. He stood in that doorway in his robe and slippers and looked at the two of us and understood everything in about 4 seconds flat. What happened next was not what I expected. And it changed all four of us in ways none of us saw coming. My name is Reese. I am 26 years old now and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. 7 years ago I was a freshman in college, home for winter break, sleeping in my childhood bedroom in a house that suddenly had new people in it. My mother Carol had been dating Frank Calloway for 8 months. Frank was a good man. Steady, kind, the sort of person who fixed things around the house without being asked and remembered how you took your coffee after hearing it once. Frank had a son. His name was Jake. Jake was 21. Pre-med. Home from his second year of college for the same winter break. And from the moment we met at the awkward first family dinner where our parents were clearly nervous and trying too hard, from that exact moment, there was something between us that neither of us knew what to do with. Let me be clear about something first. Jake and I were not related. Not by blood. Not legally. Our parents had been dating for 8 months and were not yet engaged. We had never lived under the same roof. We had never met before that dinner. But it still felt complicated. Because it was complicated. When you are 19 and someone makes you feel seen in a way you have never quite experienced before. When conversations flow like you have known each other for years instead of days, the complicated part gets quieter. And the feeling gets louder. Jake was nothing like the boys I had dated in high school. He was thoughtful in a way that surprised me. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He was funny without trying to be. He read books and argued about them passionately and wanted to know what I thought. He treated me like my opinion mattered. For a 19-year-old girl who had spent 3 years being the least interesting person in every relationship she had been in, that was everything. We spent the first 3 days of winter break circling each other carefully. Polite at family dinners. Friendly in passing. Both of us aware of the situation. Both of us trying to be responsible. Then on the 4th night there was a snowstorm that knocked out the power for 6 hours. Our parents lit candles and fell asleep early. Jake and I ended up in the kitchen with leftover pizza, a flashlight and absolutely nothing to do. We talked for 5 hours straight. About everything. College. Our mothers. The weird pressure of watching your parents date again after divorce or loss. What we wanted our lives to look like. What scared us. What we were pretending not to want. At some point the power came back on. Neither of us moved. At 2 a.m. my stepfather Frank appeared in the kitchen doorway. I want to describe this moment accurately because it is not what you might picture. We were sitting on opposite sides of the kitchen table. Fully clothed. Pizza box between us. Laughing about something stupid. I think it was a story Jake was telling about a lab experiment gone wrong. Frank stood in the doorway in his robe and looked at us. Not at the pizza. Not at the flashlight still sitting on the table. At us. The way we were looking at each other before we noticed him standing there. That look. Frank was a perceptive man. He had raised a son alone for 15 years after Jake's mother left. He knew people. He read situations the way some men read weather. He saw everything in about 4 seconds. He said, "It's late." We both said sorry simultaneously, which made it approximately 100 times more obvious. Frank nodded slowly. Got a glass of water from the sink. Looked at us one more time. Then he said, "Jake. My office. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." He went back to bed. Jake and I sat in silence for a long moment. Jake said, "Well." I said, "Yeah." We cleaned up the kitchen and went to our separate rooms and I lay in the dark staring at the ceiling wondering if I had just detonated something that couldn't be undetonated. The next morning I woke up at 7:30 to the sound of Frank and Jake talking behind the closed office door. I could not hear the words. Just the low steady rhythm of 2 voices. Frank's measured and calm. Jake starting tense and gradually settling. They were in there for an hour and 40 minutes. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table. I waited. When Jake came out, he looked at me with an expression I could not fully read. Not angry. Not embarrassed. Something more complicated than either. He said, "He wants to talk to you now." Frank's home office was a small room lined with bookshelves and smelling of old wood and coffee. He was sitting behind his desk when I came in. He gestured to the chair across from him. I sat down feeling like I was reporting to the principal's office for something I hadn't technically done yet. Frank looked at me for a moment without speaking. Not unkindly. Just directly. Then he said, "Reese, I'm going to talk to you like you're an adult. Because you are one. And because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve a lecture." I said, "Okay." He said, "I know what I saw last night. And I know my son. And I'm not going to pretend I didn't see it or that it isn't what it obviously is." I opened my mouth. He held up one hand gently. "Let me finish. Then you can say whatever you want." He leaned forward. "Here is what I want you to understand. The situation you are in is not wrong because of who you are or who Jake is. You are both good people. It is complicated because of timing and because of what your mother and I are building. And because neither of you has stopped to think about what happens in 6 months or a year if this goes somewhere and then doesn't work out. What that does to two families that are just starting to trust each other. I had not thought about that. Not fully. Not the way he was laying it out. I am not telling you what to feel," Frank continued. "I am not able to do that, and it wouldn't be right if I could. But I am asking you, both of you, to be honest. With yourselves first. And then with me and your mother." I looked at this man who had been in my life for 8 months. Who had never once tried to be my father or overstep or pretend our family was something it wasn't yet. I said, "Are you angry?" He said, "No. I'm concerned. There's a difference." I said, "What did you say to Jake?" Frank was quiet for a moment. I told him the same thing I'm telling you. That feelings are not the problem. Secrets are the problem. And that if there is something real here, it deserves more respect than sneaking around and hoping nobody notices. He stood up, which meant the conversation was shifting. "Reese, I have one question and I want you to think before you answer it." I nodded. "If Jake were not my son, if your mother and I had never met, if you had met him any other way, at school, through friends, anywhere else, would you want to pursue this?" I did not have to think for very long. "Yes," I said quietly. Frank nodded like that answer confirmed something he already knew. "Then that's what we're dealing with," he said. "Not a mistake. Complication. And complications can be handled." Telling my mother was the hardest part. Not because she was unreasonable. My mother, Carol, is one of the most emotionally intelligent people I have ever known. She processes things carefully. She does not react before she understands. But she was also a woman who had finally found happiness after years of doing everything alone. Frank represented stability and warmth and a future she had stopped believing she deserved. The idea that her daughter and his son had feelings for each other, that the family she was building had this unexpected complication woven into it before it had even fully formed, I knew that would be a lot to carry. Frank told her with me present. He sat beside her on the couch and laid it out plainly and honestly the way he did everything. He held her hand while he talked. My mother listened without interrupting. When Frank finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked at me and said, "How long has this been happening?" I said, 5 days. "Nothing has happened, Mom. We just talked." She said, "But you wanted to." It wasn't a question. I said, "I don't know what I want. I know I've never talked to anyone the way I talked to him." My mother closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, she looked at Frank. Something passed between them that I recognized even though I could not name it. The shorthand of two people who have decided to trust each other. My mother looked back at me. She said, "I need a week. I need to think about this without pressure from anyone. And I need you and Jake to agree that nothing moves forward until I've had that week." I said yes immediately. Jake, when Frank relayed the terms, said yes without hesitation. We gave her the week. My mother came to me 7 days later on a Sunday morning. She sat on the edge of my bed the way she used to when I was small and something was wrong at school. She had a mug of tea in both hands and she looked like she had been doing a lot of thinking. She said, "I have conditions." I sat up straight. "You and Jake do not sneak around. Ever. If this is real, it happens in the open or it doesn't happen at all." I nodded. You both finish your current semesters before anything changes. School comes first. No dramatic decisions made on winter break feelings. I nodded again. And if this damages my relationship with Frank, if it creates tension or conflict that can't be resolved, we all agree up front to handle it like adults. No sides. No ultimatums. She looked at me steadily. Can you agree to all of that? I said yes. Absolutely yes. She nodded slowly, sipped her tea. Then she said, he seems like a good person, Reese. I said, he is, Mom. She said, he better be. That was 7 years ago. Jake and I have been together for 6 of those 7 years. We got engaged last spring on a hiking trail in the Smoky Mountains that Frank suggested because he had proposed to my mother there 8 months earlier. Our parents have been married for 5 years. Frank is the most present and loving stepfather I could have asked for. My mother and Jake have a relationship that genuinely moves me. She went to every one of his medical school graduations and he calls her every Sunday. We are a family. A real one. Built on honesty and patience, and the willingness to have uncomfortable conversations instead of avoiding them. It started with Frank standing in a kitchen doorway at 2 a.m. and choosing to handle it with wisdom instead of anger. I am grateful every single day that he did. Here is what I want you to take from this story. Complicated feelings are not the enemy. Secrets are the enemy. Running from hard conversations is the enemy. Frank could have reacted with anger and shut everything down. My mother could have made it about her fears instead of our reality. Jake and I could have hidden everything and let it explode later in a way that hurt everyone. Instead, everybody chose honesty. Everybody chose to sit in the discomfort and talk it through. That choice built something real. If you are in a complicated situation right now, something that feels too messy to talk about, too awkward to bring into the light, I want you to consider that the conversation you are avoiding might be the one that saves everything. Drop a comment and tell me what part of this story hit hardest. And tell me the city you're watching from.